words. He said, something terrible is going to happen. We're hearing camp commanders on the phone with their students, and they're crying and saying, I'll see you in paradise. And he said, I'm begging you, if you have any sources inside Al-Qaeda, please help us.
CIA agent.
I was recruited by the CIA beginning in the late 1980s, but in a very odd way that is no longer legal. I was in graduate school at George Washington University in Washington, D.C. I was taking a class called The Psychology of Leadership that was taught by an eminent psychiatrist by the name of Dr. Gerald Post.
Nah, I'm really from D.C. Shouts out from D.C.
Dr. Post gave us an assignment one day where we had to shadow our bosses and write a psychological evaluation of our bosses. And I was shadowing my boss. And he was a very difficult, mean, unpleasant, strong,
who the bad luck
kind of person. And I went back to my apartment and I wrote my paper. And I said that he was a sociopath with psychopathic and possibly violent tendencies. I gave Dr. Post the paper, and a week later, he gives it back to me, and he gave me an A, and underneath the A, he wrote, please see me after class. So I went to see him, and I said, Dr. Post, you wanted to see me? He said, come to my office. So we went downstairs in the building into his little academic's office. He closed the door, and he said, look, I'm not really a professor here. I'm a CIA officer undercover as a professor here. And I'm looking for people who would fit into the CIA's culture. I think you would fit in. Do you want to be a CIA officer?
How do you become a, like...
And I said, yes.
How do you join the CIA?
And so he made some calls. It was up to me to pass all the tests.
Like if I want to join the CIA, how should I go about that motherfucker? No more pauses throughout the entire video. From now on, no more pauses.
But that's how I got into the CIA.
And I guess when
Take
you
a
first
test,
joined the CIA,
but I'll pass that motherfucker.
Global political landscape like, and what was the US's stance with their foreign policy?
When I joined the CIA, the Soviet Union was literally in the process of collapsing. And so all eyes were on Eastern Europe. My expertise was in...
I'll be an amazing spy.
A bachelor's degree in Middle Eastern studies. I had studied...
Put me in North Korea. I'll come out with all the details.
The leading Muslim scholars in the West. And my master's degree was in... focused on foreign policy analysis. So I was very specific about the Middle East. And so I was assigned to Iraq. And
Iraq.
I immediately became Saddam Hussein's classified biographer in the intelligence community. So while the Soviet
I think you have to be a good liar.
And those analysts are becoming big stars.
How you know I'm not a good liar?
Iraq, and then much to my shock and the world's shock, 9 months later, Iraq invaded Kuwait and overthrew the Kuwaiti royal family and seized Kuwait's oil fields. This was a naked act of aggression and war. And so I walked in that morning. I got up early because we knew that the invasion was coming. We predicted 30 days before that Saddam would invade Kuwait.
Yo, tomorrow my mic is coming in and we'll be able to use the soundboard. Hopefully.
I got into the office early and my boss sort of intercepted me and said, don't take your jacket off. We're going to the White House. And I had never been to the White House before. So we got in a car, we drove to the White House, and we were escorted into the Oval Office. And keep in mind, I was 25 years old at the time. And you walk into the Oval Office, and here's the president, the vice president, the national security advisor, the CIA director, my boss, and me. And the mood is very heavy. So everybody sits down, and the president says, well, now what do we do? And then everybody turns and looks at me. And it took me a second to get my bearings. And I said, well, the Kuwaiti government's been overthrown. The Iraqi government announced this morning that they had installed Ahmed al-Khatib as the occupation governor.
Yo! Nigga, we're literally going into war right now, yo. with Iran. Did y'all hear that? Bro, we're literally, I think we're literally in a war right now with Iran. And we could get bombed. Bro, I thought about that shit this morning. But like it felt like nobody was panicking. It felt like a regular day. Like, bro, what if I get fucking bombed on stream? Y'all niggas are just gonna laugh at me. What if like, bro, and I'm near DC, bro.
Kuwait, I said, unfortunately, we happen to know a lot about Ahmed Khatib. He got a medical degree at the American University.
Trump literally did some shit where I think he sent some bombs to Iran, bro. It's up.
Beirut, and his college roommate was George Habash, and together they created the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. And the vice president says, Jesus Christ. And I thought, wow, this is bad. We finished the briefing, got up and walked out, and two things happened. My boss said to me, there's something you need to understand. He said, I'm not sure that you're appreciating the importance of what's happening. It's not unusual for a country that we cover to go to war. It's highly unusual for a country that we cover to go to war with us. And then later that afternoon, Margaret Thatcher, who at the time was the British Prime Minister, called the president. It was George H.W. Bush, and famously told him, these were her words, now's not the time to go wobbly, George. And
what does that mean?
That call was like a wake-up call for George H.W.
He said, pick your nuts up.
And so we sent the largest army deployed since the end of the Vietnam War. We invaded Kuwait, we liberated it, and then the rest is history.
You were then stationed in the Middle East. What was your role out there?
I served first in Saudi Arabia, then in Kuwait, and then I went back to headquarters for a while and decided that I so loved serving overseas that I wanted to do it on a longer-term basis. So I applied for what's called a rotation at the State Department. And I mean, this was an honest-to-God State Department job where I left the CIA and I went to the State Department. I was sworn in as a Foreign Service officer, and I became the economic officer at the American Embassy in Bahrain for 2 years, and then back to headquarters to work on Iraq again. But I did get bored. After 7.5 years of Iraq, every single day Iraq. And so I made a very unusual transition from intelligence to operations, and specifically to counter-terrorist operations.
And what does that mean?
So as an analyst, your job is to sit in a cubicle, read all source intelligence that's coming in from all over the world, think the big thoughts, write papers that probably nobody will ever read. Once or twice a week, you write something for the president, if it's important enough to merit his attention. And then you go home at the end of the day. Counterterrorism operations was what you see in the movies. I went straight into weapons. And then after weapons, I went into explosives. After explosives, I went into counter-terrorist driving. And then advanced counter-terrorist driving, which was
What does that
out in
mean?
the desert. out
Terrorist
west.
driving?
And then you learn how to spot, assess, develop, and recruit spies to steal secrets.
And what year was this?
That was 1997.
Oh, shit.
And was there any other time in these years that you were questioning the ethics of the agency and the work you were doing?
No, I didn't question the ethics of the agency at the time for a very specific reason. When Bill Clinton was elected president, he issued an order that the CIA had to, what they called, cull their recruited assets. Anybody who had
I was about to ask, like, does it matter if he's talking since it was like back in the day? But like, that era was kind of like important. Wasn't that like weapons of mass destruction era and like the war on like the Middle East and shit? That's kind of important uh, secret info right there. I need him to let me know the details of what the fuck they got going on or what they had going on.
Had what the White House described as a human
Because if he got locked up for saying some shit, it gotta be like juicy.
rights problem was to be fired, right? So we didn't want to do business anymore in the 1990s with death squad leaders or assassins. And Clinton was serious about that. And I remember saying to a colleague at the time, I can't believe they're actually serious about human rights. This is really a very pleasant surprise for me. But Bill Clinton wasn't president forever. He was only president for 8 years. And then 9/11 happened, and literally everything changed in the blink of an eye.
So in 2001, where were you working? What was your role at that time?
In 2001, I had just returned from my first overseas
9/11 had to be like the fucking, had to be like the ship's like, alright, we on these niggas.
operational tour in Athens. And
I feel like that's low key. 9/11 had to be like. First of all, end of a generation, and also when the U.S. decided, like, all right, we gonna be slimy, but we gonna be like the quote unquote bad guys.
and I was working in headquarters, and my job was to train Middle Eastern intelligence services in how to carry out counterterrorism.
And that's why I feel like. Wait, can I talk about Republicans on Twitch, or will I get banned? Is that TOS? I feel like that's why. I wasn't gonna say nothing crazy. I feel like that's why Republicans have like the mindset that they do have, or Trump has the mindset that he has right now, and why he's doing what he's doing. Because he's very, como se dice, on, not on edge, but like trying to like, you know what I'm saying, make sure no foreigners take advantage of us like that again, even though like 9/11 was in 2001.
Terrorism operations.
I don't think they on that type of timing no more.
And so
I don't think niggas is on
had
that type of
to
timing no more.
go to the White House on the morning of September 11th, 2001, with the director of the CIA's Counterterrorism Center, Ambassador Kofor Black. And I walked over to his office to tell him that our car was ready to take us to the White House. And when I got there, his secretary had a small TV on her desk because you couldn't watch TV on your computers back then. And the news was on, and one of the towers of the World Trade Center was burning. And I said, "What happened to the World Trade Center?" She said, "A plane had flown into it." And I said, well, you know, that happened once before. In 1932, a plane flew into the Empire State Building.
So Nick just
But
thought it was normal?
really raining and very foggy that day. It's so clear today. How can you not see that you're flying into the World Trade Center? And as soon as I said it, the second plane hit. And she turned to me and she said, "Did you see that, or did I imagine it?" And I ran back to my office and I said, "Guys, 2 planes just hit both towers of the World Trade Center. I think we're under attack." And then everyone ran up to the director's office. TVs all over the place.
Yo, imagine feeling like y'all under attack, bro. Imagine have to announce that.
And we're all just standing there. And then the third plane hits the Pentagon. There was an officer from the CIA police force. We have our own internal police force. and he came in and he said, everybody evacuate, right now, everybody evacuate. Nobody budged. We just stood there. And then finally somebody shouted, behind me, somebody shouted, will someone please lead? And Kofor said, yeah, you, go to the director's office and tell him this. You, go to security and tell him that. You, go up to operations. And, and so everybody started to scramble. The rest of us are just standing there. And then finally, a guy said to me, a guy I was standing next to, he said, there's still a plane in the air. And I think we should probably assume that it's coming here.
Oh my God.
So my girlfriend, who later became my wife, she was
Yo,
also a senior.
Didn't like niggas on the plane, on I think that plane that he's talking about, like find out like two others like crashed into that shit, like crashed into the World Trade Center, and niggas took over the plane because they knew it was getting hijacked.
CIA officer. She met me at my apartment, and we went to the roof and we watched the Pentagon burn for an hour. And then she said, we should try to donate blood. So we went, there were blood mobiles all over the place, but the lines were so long, they told us it'll be 24 hours before they could clear the line. And I said to her, this is ridiculous, we have to go back to work. So I walked back to my car, drove across the grassy median, drove back to the CIA, and then I didn't leave for 4 days. I just balled up my jacket and I slept under my desk.
And I guess from that point it changed everything.
It changed literally everything. I remember saying to a colleague, do they realize what they've done? I mean, I get that this group wants to strike a blow to US hegemony and the empire. I get it. But do they know nothing from history? Do they not know that our response is going to be 1,000 times what they did to us? And certainly, we spent, altogether in the so-called war on terror, we spent $23 trillion.
Yo.
And we killed as many as 2 million people.
Did they use nukes?
Did they not see that coming? Osama bin Laden said later that he wanted to damage the US economy. He failed. And he was responsible then for, the deaths of an untold number of people. What did he think he was really going to accomplish? So it was a failure all around and changed the world permanently.
And who was Osama bin Laden and what was his intention?
The bin Laden family is a very honorable, very highly respected family. Dozens of them live permanently in the United States. They have billions and billions of dollars, and they have made that money through bin Laden Industries. So Osama bin Laden...
Wasn't there a story game where I had to fucking sneak into Iran and fucking take out their leader or some shit? Or sneak into some... I don't know, bro. What was it called, bro? It's with that little girl who can, like, move shit with her mind, bro. That game was a trip.
Who had vacationed as a teenager in the United States and all over Western Europe and was very Americanized, self-radicalized after the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan in 1979. He went to Afghanistan in the late 1980s to fight the Soviets. He was the only member of his family that self-radicalized. Everybody else, lived the good life in France, in the UK, and in the United States. And so he came up on our radar as somebody who was potentially dangerous. I sat next to a guy when I first got hired, and in the summer of 1990, he wrote a paper saying that he believed Osama bin Laden was the most dangerous man in the world. And I remember saying, who? I never heard of this guy. And he said, buddy, this is one bad guy. Watch and see. Watch and see. Well, 5 years later, I'm living in Bahrain. I'm at lunch in the embassy cafeteria, and the TV is on. And here there's a terrorist attack in Dhahran, Saudi Arabia, at a facility called OPM Sang. This was a joint facility of the U.S. military and the Saudi Arabian National Guard. And terrorists had gotten onto the base and had killed something like 5 people. And I think they were all third country nationals. I think they were Indians. So this group called Al-Qaeda took responsibility for this attack. Nobody had ever heard of Al-Qaeda. So the Saudis did what the Saudis do, and they rounded up 12.5 people. They all confessed using the identical language on national TV, and they were all immediately beheaded. Some of them may have had something to do with the attack. Some of them probably didn't have anything to do with the attack, but certainly the masterminds of this attack got away, bin Laden being the one, and he went to Afghanistan. Well, in Afghanistan, with the fall of the pro-Soviet communist government and the advent of a Taliban government, he was free to do anything he wanted. And so he ordered that his underlings create 2 training camps in southern Afghanistan, one in Kandahar province and one in Helmand province. By 2001, Al-Qaeda had carried out several large-scale attacks. And we said, well, we've got to get on the stick, and we have to find this guy, and we have to stop him. So the FBI began investigating so that he could be charged with a crime. The CIA began looking for him. We knew that he was somewhere in...
Did we find him dead?
Afghanistan, probably in Kandahar, but...
Did we kill him?
But it was impossible to really find him. And then...
How did we kill him?
On July the 6th, 2001, I was at CIA headquarters, and I was entertaining a delegation from a Middle Eastern intelligence service. We did this literally every single day. I had arranged a briefing on Al-Qaeda with a young, like 23-year-old analyst. So I said, well, we're going to start off today with a briefing on Al-Qaeda. The door opens, and Ambassador Black walks in with the chief of operations for the Osama bin Laden group. And I was so shocked, I stood up and I said, gentlemen, this is Ambassador Cofer Black. He is the CIA's director of counterterrorism, and this is the director of operations for our Osama bin Laden group. And he sat down, and I'll never forget his words. He said, something terrible is going to happen. We don't know when, and we don't know where, but we know it's going to be an attack on a massive scale. We're hearing code words for a huge attack. The honey salesman is coming with vast quantities of honey. There's going to be a great wedding. There's going to be a great football match. These are all code words for an attack. He said, we're hearing camp commanders on the phone with their students, and they're crying and saying, I'll see you in paradise. And he said, I'm begging you, if you have any sources inside Al-Qaeda, please help us. They were just as shocked by this briefing as I was. They didn't say anything. He got up, he shook their hands, they walked out. At the end of the day, I sent these guys back to their hotel. It was going to be a few hours before dinner. So I went to Cofer's office to thank him for spending the time. I said, Cofer, I have to ask you, I'm not working on Al-Qaeda. Did you say that just for their benefit, or were you serious? And he said, oh, I was deadly serious. Something terrible is going to happen. And then sure enough, 2 months later, there it was.
From that moment after September 11th, you were very involved in tracking down senior members of Al-Qaeda. How did that work?
Well, like everybody in the building, I volunteered to go to Afghanistan on September 12th. And I volunteered again, and again, and again, 4 times. And they kept putting me off. Well, I was one of only 16 fluent Arabic speakers at the CIA at the time. I had worked years earlier for the deputy director of the Counterterrorism Center, so I considered him to be a friend. I went into his office and I made a bold and completely empty threat. And I said, if you don't send me to Afghanistan right now, I am going straight to Exxon with my Arabic, and I'm not looking back. And he says, take it easy, take it easy. Can you go to Pakistan? And I said, yes. When? He said, tomorrow. I said, yes. What do you want me to do there? He said, I want you to be the chief of counterterrorism operations. I said, fine. And so I left the next day. I arrived in Islamabad at 4 o'clock in the morning, and then the driver said, oh, I'll pick you up at 7 to take you in the office.
Does he have a
And
wife?
I said, oh my God, please. I can't sleep on planes. I haven't slept since I left Washington. It's been 24 hours. Let me have another hour. Pick me up at 8. So he picked me up at 8. I was like a zombie. And I went in and introduced myself to the chief. And I said, I'm your new chief of counterterrorism. And he said, okay, have a seat. So he said, here's what I want you to do today. I want you to come up with a standard operating procedure to take down a terrorist safe house. And I said,
What
okay.
the fuck?
So I went back to my office.
What does that even mean?
And I sat with a legal pad.
Nigga, if they said that shit to me, I'm looking at them like,
And I thought, okay, if I were going to take down a terrorist safe house, how would I do that?
Nigga, just write that bitch, right?
And then I thought, I would want it to be dark. I wouldn't want anybody to see me. So I wrote O200 at the top of the paper. And then I thought, I need weapons.
Yes.
Like lots of weapons. I bought guns, ammunition, night vision goggles,
Yeah.
battering rams,
Okay.
bulletproof vests,
Okay.
knives, walkie-talkies.
COD campaign mode.
From scratch, we started this thing.
Okay.
And I thought, well, 9/11 is an open criminal investigation, so I have to invite the FBI. And this is Pakistan. It is their country, after all, so I have to invite the Pakistanis. So I wrote, joint team, CIA, FBI, ISI, with the list of weapons. I ordered the weapons. They were there, in days. So a week later, we did our first test raid. We caught 2 Al-Qaeda fighters. Another few days later, we caught an actual mid-level guy from Egyptian Islamic Jihad. It worked. And then finally, 6 weeks later, we get word from a sister agency in the Washington suburbs that Abu Zubaydah, who we believed at the time was the number 3 in Al-Qaeda, was somewhere in Pakistan, and we had to catch him. That was all we knew. He was somewhere in Pakistan. And I said, in our morning meeting, I said, this country is the size of Texas. It has 220 million people. And what do you mean he's in Pakistan? Go catch him. But we came up with a plan, and we caught him. He was shot 3 times and severely wounded. So I sat with Abu Zubaydah for 56 hours after we shot him. The Pakistani doctors there saved his life, pumping blood into him as quickly as they could. It was just oozing out of him, pooling underneath the bed. He was soaked in blood. We were soaked in blood. It was like a scene out of a horror movie. But he lived.
What?
And then finally he asked me, what's going to happen to me? And I said, honestly, I don't know. But I'm going to give you some advice. I said, I am the nicest guy that you're going to meet in this experience. My colleagues, they're not nice like I am. So if you do one thing, it's that you have to cooperate. And he said, you seem like a nice man, but you're the enemy, and I'll never cooperate.
Ooh.
Finally,
That's how y'all niggas got right for me, bro. That's how y'all niggas got right for me. Nigga, if the FBI knocked down your door, yo, what do you know about this BigevilCorey nigga? Huh? What does dog and dog emoji and broken heart sign mean? You're like, yo, I don't know. Yo, I ain't telling you shit.
a CIA jet flew in, and 3 FBI agents and I.
If a nigga break down your walls and say, yo, tell us what fucking BEC mean, or else nigga, I'll blow your fucking head off. Like, shit, I don't even know, nigga. Stop fucking talking to me, pussy. Like, that's how y'all gotta ride.
And carried him out to the plane. He was crying. He asked if I would hold his hand, which I did. We had to maneuver him. We had to stand him up on the gurney. He was strapped down. We had to maneuver him onto the plane. We laid him on the luggage rack at the back of the plane and tied him down.
Yo,
And he
welcome
squeezed
back,
my
V.
hand, and I said, remember, you have to cooperate.
Hi, V Stream.
And then he flew off. Well, a few weeks later, I flew back to headquarters. And I was in the cafeteria one day, just standing in the sandwich line. And a senior officer walked up to me and said, very casually,
We need to
"Hey,
talk.
I'm so glad I ran into you.
Discord.
Do you want to be certified?
I'm kinda in the middle of a very good video. Can it wait till like 12:30? Quick stream.
Intelligence. The intelligence that we gathered successfully was intelligence gathered by the FBI in the person of Ali Soufan,
I got you.
who was an FBI agent who used
I don't know what that cutscene was.
the
Yo,
tried and true
bad cutscenes, bad cutscenes. We have to press X. We have to press
FBI
X.
technique of establishing a rapport with the prisoner, a relationship. You offer him a cup of tea, a cigarette, an orange, a piece of paper to write a letter to his mother. You don't beat him and torture him and kill him. And so, under Ali's, guidance, Abu Zubaydah gave us actionable intelligence that saved American lives. And the CIA would start torturing him, and he would go completely silent. So it was not just wrong, ethically and legally.
Wait, did she reply to the message I said about sending the drawing? I didn't even hear her. Yeah, she said she was gonna send it. I don't know when, but she said she'll send it.
But it didn't work. If anything, it just made the situation worse.
What was the turning point that made you decide to go public about
She
this
egoed my
torture
shit.
program?
She eagled my shit though.
So clearly wrong to
It's
me
cool.
that I anticipated someone going public, and no one went public. Well, I resigned from the CIA, effective in spring of 2005, and
The nigga resigned and thought he was safe.
private sector. In December of 2007, I got a call from a reporter from ABC News, which is one of the major major networks in the United States, the American Broadcasting Corporation. And this journalist said that he had a source who said that I had tortured Abu Zubaydah. I said that was absolutely not true. I was the only person who was kind to Abu Zubaydah. And he said, well, you're welcome to come on the show and defend yourself. I didn't know that was a reporter's trick. I'd never spoken to a reporter before. I said, yeah, I'll think about it. Well, 2 days later, President Bush gives a press conference in which he looks in the camera and he says, we do not torture.
Yeah, what the fuck is my country on, bro?
Like that. And I said to my wife, he is a bald-faced liar. He's looking the American people in the eye and he's lying.
That's crazy.
And then 2 days later, he was walking to the helicopter to fly to Camp David. And
What's
reporters
that?
always shout questions at the
What's
president
Camp
when
David?
he's walking in a helicopter. And usually he just goes like this, like he can't hear, and waves. They can always hear. So a reporter shouts a question about torture, and he turns and he says, well, if there is torture, it's because of a rogue CIA officer. And I said to my wife,
Who?
Brian Ross's sources at the White House,
Who is he talking to?
and they're going to try to pin this on me.
Oh God.
Because they were angry that I was the only one that declined. So I called the reporter, Brian Ross, and I said, I'll give you your interview. And I decided in the days leading up to it that I was simply going to tell the truth. No matter what he asked me, I was just going to
GG's. GG's. GG's.
tell the truth. And that's what I did.
And what truth was that?
The truth was the CIA was torturing its prisoners. Torture was official U.S. government policy. It was not the result of a rogue. And the policy had been personally approved by the president. So the FBI began investigating me. At the CIA's
GG's.
behest. They investigated me for an entire year, from December of 2007 to December of 2008. And they determined that I had not committed a crime. That torture was illegal, and it is illegal to classify an illegality. And so they said, oh, you're free to go. So my wife and I actually went out that night to celebrate. 3 weeks later, Barack Obama became president, and he named John Brennan as the Deputy National Security Advisor for Counterterrorism. John and I always hated each other. And I didn't know that John asked the Justice Department to secretly reopen the case against me. So for the next 3 years, my phones were tapped, my emails were intercepted, and teams of FBI agents followed me everywhere I went. Finally, in January of 2012, I was arrested and charged with 5 felonies, including 3 counts of espionage. Espionage can be a death penalty offense.
What is that?
And so I had to fight. I was confident in my heart that I had done nothing wrong. The espionage charges were thrown out. I hadn't committed espionage. But I had 5 children at home. And I had gone bankrupt because of the legal fees. I actually still owe my attorneys $1,150,000 that they'll never see. I'll never have that money to pay them. And so the Justice Department does what it does.
Yo!
I was facing 45 years. They offered me 23 months. And
Why he
I
talking
actually
like
turned it
that?
down. And my lead attorney got right in my face. And he said, you know what your problem is? Your problem is you think this is about justice. And it's not about justice. It's about mitigating damage. Take the deal.
Mitigating damage.
Well, I had done some research, and I found a study by ProPublica that found that the government wins 98.2% of its cases. And he said, do you really want to roll the dice? So I took the deal.
And you served those 23 months?
I served every single day of those 23 months.
John was sentenced with violating intelligence identities. Oh, this is what you was talking about? Him serving his time? When he served this, like back in the 90s? Or like
Every day. Well, first of all, I should say,
he not locked up now, is he?
I have 0 regrets. Somebody.
Nah,
had to
he
say
probably
something.
locked up for this interview.
0 regrets because I wanted to be able to sleep at night. I wanted my children to be proud of me. And I didn't want future generations to say, you know, that Kiriakou guy, he could have stopped this. And he didn't. You know, what kind of person is that? I wanted to be on the right side of this. I knew what was right and wrong. It was clear. It was obvious. There were a lot of bad guys in very senior, important roles at the CIA. I had to counter that. And you know, I said also that
They probably still there.
these CIA people, if they thought that prison was going to cow me, it was going to silence me, they didn't know me at all. So in my view, I won.
And you think it's had an impact on the way the CIA operates now?
It has absolutely, definitely had an impact. In fact, when Gina Haspel became the CIA director during the first Trump administration, we used to call her Bloody Gina because she was the godmother of the torture program. In her confirmation hearings before the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, she said that the torture program was wrong and that she wished she had nothing to do with it. And I said, I call that a victory.
And any intelligence officer or anyone that kind of witnesses wrongdoing and they want to speak out, what advice would you give to someone?
You have to go
Advice.
with your conscience.
Advice, nigga. Your advice, nigga, you serve that time. And speak out. Speak out, serve that time, speak out again. Or not.
The CIA likes for its officers to believe that everything in life is a shade
Nigga, they gonna lock you up for fucking forever, nigga.
of gray. And that's just simply not true. Some
My
things
fault.
in life are black and white,
My fault.
right and wrong. And deep down, we know what's right and what's wrong. So
Nah,
trust
why are they
yourself.
playing this music?
Trust your judgment, even if you know there's going to be fallout.
Why are they playing this music? No, what a hero.
Being hunted by.
What a hero, man. Nah, I respect it though. I respect it.